The summer I got out of college, a friend from England invited me to visit him in London. So, next thing you know, I'm getting out of a London black cab very early in the morning at his flat. And instead of him meeting me, there was this little Greek grandmother waiting for me with a note. Now, this was long before cell phones. And the note said that my friend had been delayed and he wouldn't be back until later that night, but his landlord would be happy to let me in and I could make myself at home. Well, the woman let me in, and I plopped down my bags and thanked her. But instead of leaving me there, she motioned for me to follow her, quite urgently. And she seemed so confident in her agenda, I followed her out the door. Now, apparently the limit of her English was that she knew how to say, "Good morning," and "Okay." And while we walked down the street together, she would greet everybody that walked by with, "Good morning." And no matter what they said in return, she would proclaim, "Okay." And she may have been a grandmother, but she was a live wire. And she took me to this little cafe where they served us both Turkish coffee, and that got us going. And she introduced herself as Alexandra, and I introduced myself, and she said, "Okay." And then she took me on a walking tour of London with her big handbag and sensible shoes. Now, London is a gigantic labyrinth of a city, but she strode forth and took me to the most delightful, out-of-the-way places that were on no tourist map that I ever saw. And I realized, oh, this is her London. And what a treat. And eventually, she took us to this little private park with a little pond, and she pulled out of her handbag a full Greek lunch with olives and lamb pastries and Retsina wine, and which she'd carried around all morning for miles. And people would walk by and she would wave and say good morning, even though it was 2 p.m. And in any case, we spent the whole day together, most of it laughing, at the language barrier. Because, it's sort of surprising how much you can communicate just through vibes. And we walked back to the flat together, arm in arm, and stopped at this little Greek market around the corner from the flat where the proprietor emerged in kind of a panic. Because besides being the store owner, the man was my friend's landlord, and Alexandra was his mother. And his instructions to her had been that she was just supposed to let me into the flat and then come back to work on the market. But the idea that I'd be on my own in such a big city had offended her. So she had grabbed a bunch of things from the shelves, stuffed them into her purse, and the rest is as I've described. And as you might guess, nothing about that whole trip ever managed to match that first day. Her instruction had been just to let me into the apartment. That was it. By the way, the Greek word for hospitality is philoxenia. Philos for loving and xenos for stranger.